Welcome back to the Doctor Who Collectors Podcast. And if you're new, welcome. I am Larry Van Mersbergen, your host, and I have been collecting Doctor Who since 1981. In 1985, I started a Doctor Who store here in Chicago called Bundles from Britain, and we are mentioned in the official history book Red, White, and Who, the story of Doctor Who in America, written by some wonderful friends of mine, including Stephen Warren Hill, the late Jennifer Adams Kelly, Nick Seidler, and Robert Warnock. Please support this book. It's published by ATB Publishing. We live on page 384. Also, join us at the 20th anniversary of the largest Doctor Who convention in the Midwest, Chicago TARDIS. Chicago TARDIS is at the Westin Hotel in Lombard every Thanksgiving weekend. Go to chicagotardis.com for registration information and guests, including Paul McGann, the 8th Doctor, was just announced recently. So meet him if you haven't met him already. He's a wonderful, wonderful man. And we're going to talk a little bit about Mr. McGann today. Another podcast I want to mention out there, if it's not already in your playlist, make sure you get the Target Book Club podcast hosted by my good friend Tony Witt and also on iTunes. I will be a guest later this summer when we talk about the book Day of the Daleks, and I'll get more into that book in a little bit. Our theme song is Who's Doctor Who, written by Barry Mason and Les Reed, performed by the great Fraser Hines, friend of the podcast, and played Jamie McCrimmon in over 113 Doctor Who episodes, the longest-running character. So today I'm going to talk about my first collectibles. In 1981, I discovered a local comic book store in Morton Grove, Illinois, called The Comic Connection. It was on Dempster Street next to a Baskin-Robbins. I think there was a bank on the corner and an Eagle food store. So if you're familiar with the area, that's what it looked like back in 1981. Anyway, it was a comic book store. You walked in the door, and on the right-hand side, when you walked in, was a wall-mounted shelf that actually had Doctor Who items in there, and I had never seen those before. That was kind of a new thing. I think my mother was grocery shopping and told me I could go over and take a look. And so I did. And so, of course, I didn't have a lot of money back then. I was very young in 1981. So I thought I can afford three things. So I bought three items. So the first thing I bought is one of my favorite Doctor Who stories is Doctor Who, The Day of the Daleks, with John Pertwee and Katie Manning. Katie Manning is also a friend of the podcast. Anyway, the book I had was a second edition Target book print with the classic Doctor Who logo on the front and John Pertwee Daleks, the Chris Achilleos cover. And I read that book several times, but I kept it in really good shape. I still have it. I paid $4 and plus tax back in 1981 for that book. And one notable thing about the Day of the Daleks book, and I'll mention this in the Target Book Club podcast as well, is that it is most notable for its profoundly noticeable typo on the last page of the story, where it says, "Oh, come on, Dotcor," said the Brigadier. And that, by the way, that typo remains for at least 4 printings. If you caught the last podcast episode where I talked about the Pinnacle books, I mentioned this there, that they actually corrected it in the Pinnacle edition, but they also Americanized it. So I always recommend that one. So that was $4. And then I was intrigued by the current Doctor Who Monthly, and I believe it was the current Doctor Who Monthly. Actually, it was the one that was available at the Comic Connection at that time. November number 70, 45p on the front cover. The book was $2.50 for the magazine. It had featuring Britain's best-loved science fiction hero with a picture of Peter Davison on the front cover, and I was like, okay, I'm completely a new Doctor. Wow, hey. We were still watching Tom Baker episodes here in Chicago on WTTW Channel 11. We had not heard of or even been hinted to a new Doctor. Of course, this is the days long before Google and internet. So I bought the magazine. I bought 2 copies of the magazine. I spent $5. So somewhere I'm up to $9 and change here. And so let me walk you through the monthly. The monthly today, you probably pay about $10 on up for a copy in mint condition. But what I liked about this was a great issue. You had a pinup of Peter Davison on the inside front cover, and then the Gallifrey Guardian, which was the news, the convention for 1983. Thousands flocked to con in America. So the Doctor Who convention that included Sarah Sutton, Anthony Ainley. I was at that convention, and it was the Panopticon West. So it was my first Doctor Who convention. It was a very exciting moment. And then the list of Doctor Who stories for sale to overseas, the 5 Faces of Doctor Who package that was, for the 83 20th anniversary. And then, of course, John Nathan Turner confirming he was still the producer for another year. The Matrix Data Bank, which had a bunch of news. Letters to the Doctor Who magazine. Of course, the Doctor Who by Tim Quinn and Dickie Howett, which I loved. Peter Davison chasing the Master into a pillar, and he runs headfirst into the pillar, and he walked into the wrong pillar. And one of my favorite comics, The Stockbridge Horror, where a group of construction folks blow up the side of a mountain and find the TARDIS embedded in rock, and they about faint from the fact that it would have to be millions of years old in rock. So a very interesting story. Doctor has a lot of... actually, there's a scene where he has a conversation with the Scarecrow, a little Wurzel Gummidge reference. A little article on Doctor Who in the Radio Times with a picture of the Radio Times from 1966, it looks like here, from Power of the Daleks. Little pictures from there. The center was a poster, the famous back-to-back picture of Peter Davison and Anthony Ainley. I'll try to find a picture of that to post. Ads, of course, for other Marvel products. An episode guide of the Series 4Y, 4Z, Underworld, Invasion of Time, Ribos Operation. And then another article of Doctor Who in the movies, a featurette on Peter Cushing, the Forgotten Doctor, for his 2 films. And then some great stuff there. A little ad for Starburst magazine. Archive article on the Sea Devils, one of my favorite stories featuring John Pertwee. And then a comics update here, including some nice images from John Pertwee and Tom Baker. The inside back cover is a picture of Tom Baker, and the back cover was an advertisement for a new production of Cinderella, produced by John Nathan Turner, starring Peter Davison, Sandra Dickinson, and Anthony Ainley. So the last thing I found, they had a Doctor Who coffee mug, and it was not very good. I bought a better mug, actually, in 1985. And this one is the 85 mug I bought when I started Bundles from Britain. This was the first mug I purchased. I decided not to buy the mug. I'm going to talk about the mug I bought when I bought the store, when I started the store. And I'll talk about Bundles from Britain in another episode, its full history and where it is and where it happened to it and what became of it and where it went from there. So it's an interesting story, and I'm not the only person involved, so it's kind of a neat thing. So anyway, those were my first collectibles. I spent a little over $10, which, for only 3 things, my mother was not pleased, but that's okay. She introduced me to Doctor Who in 1975, so I think she was prepared for that. And I lost my mother in 1998, so I still thank her every day for the opportunity to be a Doctor Who fan.
In the city of San Francisco, on the eve of the new millennium, a time traveler dropped in from another world.
I'm not human. I am not like you. He's flatlining!
A mysterious visitor with the power to defy death and be reborn in a new body.
The dead stay dead. You can't turn back time.
Yes, you can.
Now he must face an old enemy.
I'm alive!
More deadly
He has opened the Eye of Harmony.
than anything the Earth has ever seen.
By midnight tonight, this planet will be pulled inside out.
Go behind the scenes as the Fox Tuesday Night Movie presents the motion picture event of the year. Doctor Who.
Okay, as you heard in the clips, I'm about to talk about the Doctor Who movie from starring Paul McGann. And on May 15th, 1996, Paul McGann officially became the Eighth Doctor, and the anniversary of that movie just happened a few days ago. Today, I'm recording this podcast on May 18th. So there was a lot of activity on Facebook recognizing that. And of course, Paul McGann will be the guest at the Chicago TARDIS convention this November. Anyway, he was in the Doctor Who movie along with Daphne Ashbrook, Eric Roberts, Sylvester McCoy, and Yi Ji So. So my first experience with that is I was a big fan of the X-Files at the time, and I was watching an episode of the X-Files, and there was a commercial break, and all of a sudden there was all these scenes, and I'm like, what's going on? And I didn't really recognize anything because it was going by pretty fast, and then I do remember the TARDIS spinning, and the last part was Doctor Who, and I'm like, really? And of course, 96. I did have AOL back then, but it was not very easy to get online and search for information. So I found out it was airing in May, and of course I made sure I was home to watch it. Taped it on my VCR just in case, but it was an experience of a 7-year gap in the series. It closed in '89, and then Sylvester McCoy comes back to hand over the TARDIS keys to Paul McGann. And in canon, Paul McGann is the Eighth Doctor. Now, collectibles from the movie. Of course, excluding any movie props that may have found their ways into private collections, not generally available. But I think Paul McGann's coat was auctioned off somewhere. I'm not sure. Or the TARDIS interior was built. I have no idea. Anyway, here are some things that were done with the movie. There were some books published. The first one was the script of the film by Matthew Jacobs and Philip Segal. You can find that book on any bookseller, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, I think anywhere from $5 on up, possibly on eBay, depending on condition. If it's signed, it might be worth more. There was also the book Regeneration by Philip Segal, available both in hardcover and paperback. The hardcover has been long out of print, so it might be worth a little bit more than the paperback. I have not found any copies online for sale to do a price comparison, so I'm not going to state a value. The He's Back and It's About Time, the novel of the film by Gary Russell, done in paperback on BBC Books. It was also done on audiobook on cassette, and I think later a CD was issued as well on MP3, and there was a download I think you could also get. The paperback book, anywhere from $5 on up. It depends on where you find it. There were a lot of them printed, so it's not that rare. A Paul McGann action figure, I could not find a date, but if you know about that, please post it on our Facebook page, our Twitter page, or on our website under posts, comments. DoctorWhoCollectors.com is our website. Anyway, let us know. That action figure could sell for $20 on up, depending upon condition and whether or not it's mint in the box. If you watch The Big Bang Theory, mint in the box. Very important. So there wasn't a whole lot. There was also a limited edition set of postcards, which the set I've seen anywhere from $30 on up, which feature Eric Roberts and Paul McGann, Daphne Ashbrook, and several of the cast members, and Paul McGann, of course. So the movie didn't produce a lot of collectibles. Again, if you're looking at Eighth Doctor material, a lot of it is in Big Finish stories that were done long after that. Of course, his return for the 50th anniversary in basically regenerating into the War Doctor. So there wasn't a whole lot there, but I still think he's a great experience for anyone. Please watch the Doctor Who movie if you haven't. Whether you like it or not, it is part of the Doctor Who history, and it's something we should keep in mind. I'm going to bring up one last thing, of course. The podcast is produced at great expense. So we have started a Patreon page, patreon.com/Doctor Who Collectors Podcast. And if you'd like to become a friend of the podcast, we're asking $10. Of course, the podcast will remain free, and we're asking for some help with expenses. Hosting is not free. The web host, getting your thing on iTunes is not easy and does take a subscription to a third-party service. So we're asking just for a little bit of help there. We're not trying to make a profit here. We're just trying to pay expenses. So patreon.com/Doctor Who Collectors Podcast. It's, just like supporting your local radio station or whatever you want to do. If you like this podcast, consider pledging. And that concludes the Doctor Who Collectors Podcast, a short episode today, and we're going to end with another clip from the movie. So until next time, keep collecting Doctor Who.
Da Vinci. He had a cold when he drew that.
You're still fibrillating badly.
No, I'm not. Here. I remember! I was with Pacini before he died.
Name drop.
I was.
Shh. Oh my God.
You see, that's no echo. He died before he could finish Turando. Alfano finished it based on his notes. It was so sad.
You have two hearts. Who are you?
I was dead too long this time. The anesthetic almost destroyed the regenerative process.
Yeah. Right. I'm gonna get a syringe. I'm gonna take some blood. I don't know what's going on here.
Grace. Don't you see? I have 13 lives.
Please. Okay, you're trying to tell me that you've come back from the dead.
Yes.
No, sorry. The dead stay dead. You can't turn back time.
Yes, you can.
I'm not a child. Don't talk to me like I'm a child. Only children believe that crap. I am a doctor.
But it was a childish dream that made you a doctor. You dreamt you could hold back death. Isn't that true? Don't be sad, Grace. You'll do great things.